Lyra Ashwood had learned long ago that survival meant silence. In the Frostmoon Kingdom, where wolves lived by strict laws and stricter hierarchies, she kept her head down, her voice low, and her true strength hidden beneath a mask of quiet obedience. Only she knew what she was capable of. Only she remembered the pack that had once called her family, before they turned their backs on her and cast her out for a crime she never committed. That old wound had never fully healed. Years had passed since her banishment from the Blackthorn pack, yet the memory of their cold stares and the accusations she could not disprove still lived inside her like a splinter beneath the skin. She remembered the night she had been forced to leave, how the pack she had loved since birth had watched her walk away without a single voice raised in her defense. She had cried until there were no tears left, and then she had promised herself she would never again allow herself to be so powerless. She had rebuilt her life on the edges of Frostmoon territory, far from the palace, far from the Alpha King who ruled with a hand so firm that even his own warriors rarely met his eyes. She gathered herbs, traded quietly with nearby villages, and kept to herself, never drawing attention, never revealing the strength she had spent years learning to hide. It was easier that way. A wolf without a pack had no one to protect her, and a wolf who seemed weak was rarely seen as a threat worth bothering. King Draven Nightshade was not a man who forgave weakness, and mercy, in his mind, was a luxury the strong could not afford. His laws were absolute. Among them was one carved into the very bones of Frostmoon tradition. No human was ever to know the truth of their world, and no human who stumbled upon Packland was to be allowed to leave alive. It was a brutal rule, but Draven believed it kept his people safe. Lyra had always found that rule unbearable, even if she never dared say so aloud. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that gave no warning of the storm to come. Lyra was gathering herbs near the northern border when she heard voices carried on the wind, sharp and urgent. She followed the sound and found 3 Frostmoon warriors circling a young man who lay wounded against a fallen tree, his leg bent at a painful angle, his eyes wide with terror. He was human. He had wandered too far from a hiking trail and stumbled into a world he was never meant to see. The warriors were preparing to end his life, exactly as their laws demanded. One of them had already begun to shift, his shoulders widening, his teeth lengthening into something far more dangerous than the human boy could hope to survive. Lyra's heart pounded. She knew the punishment for interference. She knew the price of defying the Alpha King's law. But when she looked at the boy's frightened face, she saw not a threat, but a frightened child who had done nothing wrong except lose his way. Something inside her refused to stay silent this time. She stepped between the warriors and the boy, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest. When they refused to stand down, she did something she had not done in years. She let her true strength surface. It moved through her like a tide long held back, and the warriors, stunned by the force radiating from a wolf they had always dismissed as ordinary, hesitated just long enough for her to shield the boy and help him flee into the trees. Word of her defiance reached the palace before the sun had fully set. She was brought before the council that same night, kneeling on the cold stone floor of the great hall, while King Draven studied her with an unreadable expression. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his presence commanding even in stillness, his golden eyes sharp enough to cut through steel. Lyra had seen him from a distance before, but never this close, never with his gaze fixed solely on her. "You broke the law," he said, his voice low and controlled, though something beneath it simmered with restrained anger. "You endangered every wolf in this kingdom for the life of one human." "I saved an innocent life," Lyra answered, refusing to lower her eyes. That should mean something. The council murmured at her boldness, some in disapproval, others in quiet admiration they dared not show openly. Draven's jaw only tightened. He could not ignore what she had done, not without appearing weak before his own people, and a king, who appeared weak, invited chaos he could not afford. "Do you understand what you have risked?" he asked, leaning forward slightly, his golden eyes searching hers as though trying to solve a puzzle he could not name. "If word spreads that a human saw our world and lived, it could bring hunters, exposure, ruin to everything my father built, and everything I have sworn to protect." "And if word spreads that Frost Moon murders the innocent to protect its secrets," Lyra answered evenly, "what kind of kingdom will you have left worth protecting?" A heavy silence followed her words. For a moment, something flickered across Draven's face, an uncertainty so brief that only Lyra seemed to notice it. Then his expression hardened once more, and he rose from his throne. And so he pronounced her banishment, stripping her of pack protection and casting her out beyond the borders of Frost Moon territory, just as Blackthorn had done to her years before. Lyra accepted the sentence without tears, without pleading. She simply rose, met the king's eyes one final time, and walked out into the night. Draven told himself he felt nothing as he watched her go. Yet something inside him, some instinct buried deep beneath years of duty and control, stirred uneasily at the sight of her calm, unbroken spirit. He dismissed the feeling as irritation. He told himself it meant nothing at all. Lyra wandered for 2 days with little food and no shelter beyond the trees. Without pack protection, she was vulnerable, and it did not take long for a group of rogue wolves to sense her isolation. They found her at dusk on the 3rd day, surrounding her in a clearing at the edge of a ravine, their intentions clear in the way they circled and snarled. She fought as best she could, letting her hidden strength surface at last without fear of consequence, since she had already lost everything a punishment could take from her. But there were too many of them, 5 against 1, and exhaustion had already worn her down after days without proper food or rest. Blood trickled from a gash along her arm, and her legs trembled with the effort of staying upright. Just as one of the rogues lunged toward her, a deep, furious growl tore through the trees, and a massive black wolf crashed into the clearing with terrifying speed. It was Draven. He had felt something pull at him from within the palace walls, an ache he could not explain, a restlessness that grew unbearable until he found himself running through the forest without fully understanding why. When he saw Lyra surrounded, something inside him shattered and reformed all at once. The moment her eyes met his mid-battle, a jolt of recognition surged through his chest, sharp and undeniable. She was his mate. The realization struck him like lightning, stealing the breath from his lungs even as he fought beside her, tearing through the rogues with a ferocity born of both instinct and dawning horror. He had spent his whole life waiting for this bond, and now that he had found it, he understood with sickening clarity what he had done. He had banished his own mate into the wilderness to fend for herself. When the last rogue fled, silence fell over the clearing. Draven shifted back to his human form, breathing hard, blood on his hands, and looked at Lyra as though seeing her for the first time. She stood a few steps away, wary and guarded, refusing to run into his arms, despite the pull she now felt as well, a warmth spreading through her chest that she did not want to trust. "You're my mate," he said quietly, as if testing the words for the first time. "I know," Lyra replied, her voice steady but distant. "It doesn't change what you did." Draven flinched at the truth in her words. He stepped closer, but she held her ground, neither retreating nor welcoming him. "You banished me for showing mercy," she continued, her voice trembling now with years of buried pain. "You call it law. I call it cruelty. And it isn't the first time I've been punished for something I didn't deserve." She told him then, for the first time to anyone, the story of her banishment from Blackthorn. She had been accused of betraying pack secrets to outsiders, a crime that stripped her of her home and family. She had never been given the chance to defend herself, never been believed, simply cast out because a rival wolf, jealous of her strength and her bond with the pack's heir, had fabricated evidence against her. Draven listened in silence, his chest tightening with each word. He had judged her without knowing her, punished her without understanding the weight of what mercy had cost her before. The realization humbled him in a way nothing else ever had. "I was wrong," he said finally, his voice raw. "About the law, about you, about everything." Lyra searched his face, looking for the arrogance she expected to find, the same coldness that had sentenced her hours earlier. Instead, she found only sincerity, a vulnerability she had never imagined a king like him could possess. "Being my mate doesn't erase what happened," she said softly, "but it also isn't something I can outrun." "Then let me earn it," Draven said. "Let me prove that I can be more than the king who banished you. Let me prove that mercy and strength can exist in the same heart." Lyra did not answer right away. She needed time, and Draven, understanding the depth of the wound he had caused, did not push her further. He offered his hand, not as a king demanding obedience, but as a man asking for a second chance. She did not take it that night, but she did not walk away either. In the days that followed, Draven began undoing the damage his pride had caused. He returned to Blackthorn with Lyra to uncover the truth about her banishment, using his authority to demand a full investigation. The evidence, long buried, revealed exactly what Lyra had always known. The rival who accused her had lied out of jealousy, desperate to remove her from the pack she loved. Blackthorn's leaders, faced with undeniable proof, publicly acknowledged their mistake, though the apology came far too late to undo the years of pain Lyra had endured. Still, something inside her eased at finally being seen, finally being believed. Draven stood beside her through it all, his presence steady and unwavering, proving through actions rather than words that he intended to change. He revised Frostmoon's laws regarding humans, replacing blind cruelty with careful discretion, ensuring that innocent lives would never again be sacrificed for the sake of secrecy alone. He consulted his council, listened to voices he had once dismissed, and slowly began reshaping his kingdom into one built on both strength and compassion. Lyra watched the transformation with cautious hope, her heart softening bit by bit as she saw the sincerity behind his effort. It was not a single grand gesture that won her trust, but the accumulation of small, consistent choices, each one proving that he meant what he said. He visited the villages near the border himself, spoke with the humans who lived closest to Frostmoon land, and found ways to protect his people's secrets without resorting to cruelty. He asked for her opinion before making decisions that once would have been his alone, and slowly she began to believe that the man beside her was not simply trying to win her over, but truly trying to become someone worthy of the bond they shared. There were quiet evenings, too, when the weight of crowns and councils fell away, and they were simply two wolves sitting beside a fire, talking about nothing important at all. Draven learned that Lyra loved the smell of rain on dry earth, and Lyra learned that Draven had once been a frightened young prince who believed strength was the only language his father respected. In those small moments, something gentler than duty began to grow between them, something neither had expected to find again. Weeks later, King Draven called together the full Frostmoon Council once more, this time not to pronounce judgment, but to make a declaration. Lyra stood beside him at the center of the great hall, her chin lifted, her presence commanding despite the humble life she had lived for so long. "I banished an innocent wolf out of pride and fear," Draven said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "I let cruelty masquerade as law, and in doing so, I nearly lost the one bond that could have made this kingdom stronger than ever before. Today, I correct that mistake." He turned to Lyra, his golden eyes filled with a warmth the council had never witnessed from their king before. "Lyra Ashwood is not only reinstated as a member of this pack," he continued. "She stands before you as my mate, and as the future Luna of Frostmoon." Gasps rippled through the hall, but no one dared question him. Lyra felt the weight of 100 eyes upon her, yet for the first time in years, she did not feel small beneath their gaze. She felt seen, respected, and finally, after everything, safe. She looked at Draven, searching his face one last time for any trace of doubt, and found none. His hand reached for hers, not with the authority of a king, but with the quiet hope of a man who understood exactly what he almost lost. This time, she took it. The bond between them settled deep into place, no longer a spark of instinct alone, but something built on truth, accountability, and mutual respect. Lyra's compassion softened the edges of Frostmoon's harsh traditions, while Draven's strength gave her the protection and belonging she had been denied for far too long. In the months that followed, Frostmoon became known not for its ruthless laws, but for the balance its rulers had achieved, a kingdom where power did not come at the expense of kindness. Lyra, once banished and forgotten, now stood as a symbol of resilience, proof that mercy was never a weakness, but a strength few possessed the courage to show. And every time Draven looked at her, He remembered how close he had come to losing the one soul meant to walk beside him forever, grateful beyond words that fate had given him the chance to make it right, for good.